Hello and welcome. I'm Colin Daniel from riffninja.com, and we're on lesson number 2 out of our 5-day solo challenge. 5 lessons, 5 days. And all I've got to ask you is, did you put in your 45 minutes of practice that I asked you to do in the first lesson with the jam track? If you have, good, then we're ready to go. And I just want to discuss the chord progression briefly, and then we're going to start into our first couple of riffs, okay? Now, as I mentioned before, the chord progression is based on the 1-4-5 in E minor. And the more aware you are of the chord progression, the better you're going to be at playing your solo. And I intentionally wrote this solo with the chords in mind, of course. And if you listen carefully once you master your solo, you'll hear how the notes in my riffs for this solo line up with the chord progression. And I just wanted to briefly touch on it. It's 1, 4, and 5, which is in E minor, A minor, and B minor. They're not blues 7th chords, like a lot of blues has got the dominant 7th chord, but we're not using dominant 7ths, we're using pure minor. Now, I do use minor 7ths in the chord progression, but they're not dominant 7th. You see, this is an A dominant 7th, and this is an A minor 7th. We're going to stick with minor and minor 7th. So, I mean, like I said before, you could use the E minor, the A minor, and the B minor like this, but I actually chose to play bar chords as I moved up the fretboard, because then I can add the 7th here with my pinky. And I'll add the 7th here for the E minor 7th. And for the B minor 7th, so that's a little extra bonus that you should learn to work with. And if you really are sharp and you're really hungry, you'll learn to play the rhythm track and you'll learn the solo at the same time, and then it'll be much more complete, and your solo will get better too. Now, I'm going to mention again that my jam track has an 11-bar intro, but our solo will not start on the 11-bar intro. I want a complete 12-bar cycle to do the solo in, and the 11-bar isn't complete, it's just the intro. Later on, I'll be adding to that and using the intro, but for now, in our first solo, we're going to work on a 1 12-bar cycle, and there's 3 full 12-bar cycles plus the 11-bar intro. So you got enough to work on here, and there should be no reason to panic at all. All right, let's go to riff number 1. As I've mentioned before, it's right out of our scales. And this first riff, riff number 1, which is for the first bar, just for your information, each riff is equivalent to 1 bar. So we're going to learn 12 different riffs, right? Because we have 12 bars. So if you take a look at riff number 1, you'll see that there's a rest at the beginning, so I do not start on the first beat. I start on the second beat, and I start at the 14th fret with my 3rd finger on the 4th string, and then I cross over to the 3rd string, and that's 12th fret, and then from there, 2nd string, 12th fret. Now you can kind of cheat. I like to roll my finger over, and I'll just go, I'll roll my first finger over, so I'll go 14th fret, 4th string, 12th fret, 3rd string, then roll my first finger over and get the 12th fret, 2nd string. Now you could actually play those 3 notes together and let them ring, and that's part of your E minor chord. You know, it's the higher register, but it's still an E minor. And why would I mention that? Because if you're aware of the chord changes, then this is why this sounds so good, is because I've literally taken the notes out of the chord, right? And then I've embellished them with a couple of other notes in the scale, right? So it's going to go, once I've hit that 12th fret 2nd string, I hit it again, and then I hammer to the 15th fret with my pinky. When you hammer, you want to come down hard enough so it almost sounds like you've picked it. You want to use the bony tip of your finger and you want to hit that string hard enough so it rings out, because I'm only picking the 12th fret on the second string and I'm hammering with my pinky. So you can actually separate that and actually practice that. And after that, you're home free. So you're going to go. And you pick that 15th fret one more time. And that's riff number 1. And when you count it in, it's going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. And that's what it's going to sound like. So let's run the track, and I'll just show you where that riff fits into the first bar of our first 12-bar cycle. Okay, so that's where it fits in. That's where we're going to start our solo. Now, riff number 2 starts on the 12th fret, 4th string, and does a hammer-on to the 14th fret. So it does this. Again, the first speed is a rest. What I'd suggest is when you go through riff number 1, let the 15th fret note ring out, which is a D. Let it ring out, and then on your second beat, in the second bar, you start riff number 2. And if you need a little time to like reconfigure yourself or get your hand ready for riff number 2, then just cut the note off a little early. You don't have to like seamlessly blend it together. A little breath between phrases is a good thing, because you don't speak and keep speaking without ever taking a break, right? And neither do you when you're playing a solo. Think of your solo like a voice, okay? If you could sing this progression with your guitar, what would you play, right? Treat it like the voice. So 12th fret, 4th string, then hammer to the 14th fret. So pick, hammer, pick, slide. So it actually moves up into the 3rd position, you know, out of your 3-position scale. So it goes pick, hammer, pick and slide, then back down, all together. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now you'll notice that I don't pause, like I don't go. As soon as I strike the 14th fret, 3rd string, I slide up to the 16th fret. And then I come back down. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. All right, that's what riff number 2 sounds like. Let's put them together to complete our first 2 bars of our solo. Okay, so that's the feel of the 2 riffs together. Now, for your practice until the next lesson, I still want you, because I figure this lesson's about 15 minutes long, and this is part of your practice, is the lesson, but you still have to put in another 45. Now, the first 15 minutes of practice, just warm up by working your scales over like I discussed in the last lesson where you just run the jam track and play the scales over it to get familiar with them and tune yourself up and keep getting better at it. The more time you put into those scales, the easier this is going to be. And then what you do is you separate the riffs, riff number 1 and riff number 2. And because they're in the key of E minor and there's no outside notes, you can play riff number 1 or riff number 2 through the entire chord progression if you like. And that way you don't have to stop and keep going back to the first bar just to get the feel of it. At the end of it though, you want to be able to fit riff number 1 and riff number 2 into the bar number 1 and bar number 2. Here I'll just demo what I can do with, say, riff number 1, and we'll just start right off from the intro. I'm not going to care about whether I start on the first full 12 bar. I'm just going to work the riff over for practice, okay? And you can try different timings. You don't have to be really so precise that you copy me right to a T. You want to feel this group of notes in your own way, right? So this is what you need to do. All right, let's go for it. So you can see that there's lots of different timings and approaches. And the main idea is to just get familiar with that group of notes and then go back and discipline yourself and start with riff number 1 with the first bar and riff number 2 for the second bar. This can also be done with riff number 2. And I don't think I need to demonstrate that. I think you should have the idea. Work riff number 1 for 15 minutes of scales, right, with the jam track, then 15 minutes with riff number 1 and 15 minutes with riff number 2, and somewhere in there practice fitting riff number 1 and riff number 2 together, right? Okay, I need you to do that. If you can do that for me, we're going to get to the next part of our lesson tomorrow and you'll be ready for it. We'll see you then.